Hello. How is everybody? My name's Olivia Solon. I'm the Deputy Editor of Wired.co.uk, and we're here to talk about the role that women are playing in the tech and digital industries. And I hope that today we can celebrate some awesome women working in quite a range of businesses, and all of whom are kind of challenging stereotypes. But to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of a little bit conflicted about these sort of women in tech events in general. I do get asked to kind of chair a lot of panels like this, and I feel like sometimes we're sort of preaching to the converted, and that we're not actually kind of changing anything by talking about the issue amongst ourselves, because it's not really an issue for women, it's an issue for men, it's an issue for businesses, it's an issue for parents and children. However, this event is about just celebrating women, so I think it's in the context of this event it's all right, but often at tech events, for example, there'll be a panel that's just like women in tech, and that'll be the only kind of lady panel at the whole event, and the rest of us just like the same old men wittering on about the same old things. And actually it'd be better off if there was just women distributed throughout the event, and that would be much better. But anyway, I think today I've got a lot of questions that I want to get answered. Are there enough female role models in the tech space? Is this inequality more of an issue in the UK than elsewhere? To what extent are women holding back other women? And should we just accept that there are some industries that will attract more of a certain gender than others? So I have a phenomenal panel to help me answer those questions, and I'm going to quickly introduce them before handing over to Cheryl, who's going to do an opening presentation. To my left, yeah, to your right, I have Emma Mulqueeny, who's the founder and CEO of Rewired State and Young Rewired State. We have Mariéme Jamme, who's not actually here yet. She's arriving in a little bit. She's a bit delayed, but she's CEO of SpotOne Global Solutions, and she's co-founder of Africa Gathering. To the end, we have Julie Freeman, who's an open data artist and computer scientist working at the Open Data Institute. And Cheryl Bart is a board member at ABC, which is Australia's BBC. And all of these women, I think, are fantastic role models. But I wanted to start the panel with an introductory talk from Cheryl, who smashed through the glass ceiling. And not only has she climbed the corporate ranks, she's also climbed a lot of mountains and was part of the first ever mother-daughter team to climb to the top of Mount Everest. So Cheryl's going to talk a little bit about her work at ABC, and before the rest of the panels introduce themselves a bit more in detail, and then we'll move on to a Q&A before opening it up to the audience. Unfortunately, Cheryl's going to have to dash off because she's in hot demand at this event, so if she does run away, hopefully it's not because she's too offended. So Cheryl, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I feel in great company. I actually feel like the old blokes at the conferences, because I'm representing kind of the old blokes world of the ABC, which really is like the Australian version of the BBC. But in this sort of digital revolution that we're really in the midst of, even an old organisation, an old media organisation like the ABC, which is like 82 years old, finds itself right in the middle of it and having to adapt. And often when there are great periods of change and adaptation, I think women can really kind of find niches and find their way in, because that very linear world of the way it was all set up suddenly has some breaches, some opening, and we can dash in and create our own pathways. For example, during war, suddenly women sort of were allowed to step up and take a whole lot of other roles. So the title of mine is The Digital Future Is Now. And if you think about it, over the last 10 years, these things weren't in existence. You didn't have YouTube. That only came in 2005. Social media only arrived in 2006. The beginning of the smartphones, 2007. And the tablet, 2010. So things that totally define us. And these young women, had it with their bottled milk, are really, I'm just feeling old, are really something that's just been around in the last 10 years. The ABC is, as I said, like the BBC, and started with a handful of radio stations, and now is a fully fledged broadcaster across various radio stations, 5 TV stations, catch-up television, online, and the full gamut. It has a charter like the BBC to inform, entertain and educate, but really it's about Australians telling stories to other Australians. The problem is Australia is a huge country. If you have a look, your UK is there sitting in that little pink at the very top. So we are a huge country rather, but with a very scattered population base, mainly around the coast, as you can see, which means that we've got lots and lots of little radio stations all around the country. Having said that, digging into this for the sort of the gender and the gender diversity, I had to dig into a few of our statistics, and in fact, we have slightly more females to male in the ratio of the organisation. It's true, that's the good news. The bad news is that there are still more men in higher paying jobs, and that is something that obviously does need to be rectified and actually is. I'd actually like to say that the ABC, although we still have a long way to go, really has, surprisingly, does very well. And I'd like to hold it up as perhaps the beginning of a role model of even this kind of big, old media organisation of when you think of some of the smaller, sexier, innovative companies that are coming online. If you can sort of see that if this old and big organisation can do it, then certainly we can continue this path. So as you can see, 5 of 11 members of the ABC executive are women. So the very important head of news, head of radio, head of innovation are all women. 4 of the 9 ABC board directors are women. So it is pretty amazing. I also dug into how many women there are on air, content providers and on air. And I have to say I was surprised myself, it was about 56%. That's across the whole board. We had just over 50% of foreign correspondents female. So I'm actually going home armed with these and saying, look how amazing this is. And I've had to research this for the purpose, and I've had some help, a male helping me, with some of these statistics. Basically, though, for an old media organisation like ourselves, when we look at our fellow media organisations, all we see is trouble and no kind of future. In fact, the future for us is with the younger, smarter, innovative digital organisations. So this quote from Banquo. We did have a quick look at what happened in the music industry. You started with a Napster, then you came across with the legally Apple iTunes, and now have the streaming services such as Spotify. So, and also we've had to have a good look at how our audiences are relating, because if we are dishing out things that are irrelevant in terms of platform or content, the whole thing is going to go bad even faster than the Murdoch press is trying to make us go. So for example, say, 10, 20 years ago, only a geek could put up a website. Whereas now, each and every one of us is a journalist. Each and every one of us can be reporting news. A lot of the great uprisings of recent time, this is a picture of the Arab uprising, meant that in real time, not only could the people involved talk to one another, but also be talking to the world. Similarly, we've had to become more interactive with our audiences. One of our programs called Q&A, which I highly recommend to you, we think was the first TV program that actually had live Twitter feed across the bottom of it, and that's been a really interesting, so the audience is going, what does that guy think he's saying? And it's actually been very, very interesting. Probably the first time of a real active journalism taken notice was when this US airplane bumped into a flock of geese, and only the geese were hurt as the plane dropped into the Hudson River. And within 5 minutes, just a nearby guy took this photo and had it out on their then TwitPic. And I mean, it's just instantaneous, 5 minutes, and it was only much later that the news, the big broadcasters came behind. Similarly, in Australia, we woke up last year to this immense snow, red dust storm. We felt like we were in the middle of Australia. And again, this is a photo courtesy of one of our viewers. Of course, the other thing that we have to take care of is accuracy and veracity, because what's to stop that coming up is this is what's going on with the Harbour Bridge. So for a public broadcaster, and I know with the BBC there's a lot of pressure by the commercial stations and so on, but as a public broadcaster we feel it even more that we need to be trusted and make sure that the facts are accurate and verified. It's even more important in times where other media are very slanted one way or the other, or you have activists who are putting their point of view, or just inaccuracies. How many times did they find bin Laden around the world, We've also had to work on actually formatting all our news and programs so it fits onto a phone. I mean, things that you don't even think of. You turn on your phone and think, where's the news? Well, it actually has to be formatted. Similarly, for an iPad. Just incidentally, I just pulled out these stats. You would think that with the rise of all the iPads and iPhones that television would be dropping off, and it is going down slightly, but it's certainly not falling off the cliff as you would imagine. It still has very strong uptake. It has fallen off for the youth. Again, in terms of a gender skew, because the ABC, like the BBC, has such a broad range of programs, it is skewed more or less evenly across men and women. Women do have responded more, especially in the ages 30 to 60, to social media, have suddenly ferociously come on board. And women are more, it is more skewed to women for primetime television and for drama. It's more skewed towards men for radio. I will finish quickly on this note. I'm just trying to sort of set the scene of then having to live in the current world versus now and the future. But in our attempts to also embrace the digital world more and more, we did something quite unique just this year in this last election, working with a series of academics. We had this thing called Vote Compass, and anonymously you were asked a series of questions about, I've gone too far. You were asked a series of questions about key issues that were affecting Australians. And it was very interesting because you might think you were a Green, but then later on you placed you much more right-wing than you thought you were in answering those questions. And we were also able to cross-tabulate a whole lot of the responses, and we had a really rich sort of source of data of what Australians were considering important and so on. We had something like 1.4 million people who signed up. Another thing that we've done, which has been a great shining glory, is we have Triple J, which is our 18 to 24 radio station, and as an offshoot of that was this program called Unearthed, which now has its own digital radio station and online as well. And as part of our remit to the Australian public, this is where Australian bands get to play their music. They can upload their music, they're rated, people can talk about it, and as of yesterday, when we relaunched it and reconfigured it, there's the new button that can be shared. So they say that talent scouts no longer have to go around to the pubs and clubs, they just come on Unearthed, and in fact a lot of Aussie music has been discovered. So it's a very, very homegrown and very successful. And then to finish, the final thing we've done is embracing it, is this thing called Australian Open, where we have a range of about 40 producers, also men and women pretty well skewed, going around to not the big cities, the regional and the outback areas, and teaching local population how to use cameras, how to put things online. And we've had some sort of 50,000 people putting their own Australian stories online. So that's just a little version of, as I said, the ABC having to find its place in this new digital and highly changing world. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that. I think I'm just going to get the rest of the panel to introduce themselves a little bit more length. I was wondering if Mariéme's arrived yet or not. No, okay. We'll do a very brief introduction of you, and then I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you before I know you have to dash off in about 5-10 minutes. So Emma, can we just... okay, great.
Can you hear me? Loud. So my name's Emma Mulqueeny, and I run Rewired State and Young Rewired State. I guess I kind of accidentally stumbled into this women in technology space because 6 years ago I tried to get some kids together to engage with open data at a hack day, and couldn't find enough kids, but eventually I managed to scrabble together 50 of them. I can tell you that story at length after you managed to go. But of the 50 kids that I found, none of them were girls. And over the last few okay. And so over the last 6 years, I've made it one of the things that I work hard for is to get more girls into technology and onto those kind of programs and joining us in Young Rewired State. And started several campaigns, one of which was Your 8 is Too Late, to try and get the young girls in. I also have 2 daughters, so I have a very selfish reason for wanting them to engage. So that's why I'm here, that's why I'm in this space, and I'm also a woman in a world full of geeks. So I can speak from all of those points of view, if you like. You go.
My name's Julie Freeman. I'm an artist. I work really heavily with technology, and most of my artwork, all of my artwork, wouldn't exist without the technology within it. So it's very fundamental to me, and it's just I wouldn't call myself a woman. I am a woman in tech, but I just call myself an artist or a technologist because I just have a massive passion / obsession for technology, and so as an artist it makes sense for me to work with it, and I love it. So at the moment I'm also a PhD student at Queen Mary University. I'm in the computer science and electrical engineering department. So we do a lot of, at the moment I'm working with a lot of data analytics and building hardware and software for work, looking at how we can represent living data. And that's, my work is often about that. So I'm interested in how technology kind of can help us connect to nature in different ways. So an example of that might be, I made a piece of work where I implanted bioacoustic tags inside fish and then had them swim around the lake in their natural environment, and then used the data from them to create music and animation. So the fish were composing their own music. So that, in that sense, the work is very technical. I mean, I could tell you all about, fish surgery and how to implant tags and setting up arrays of microphones, and but it also involved a lot of coding and design work and installation work for that. So it's very multidisciplinary, I guess is what I'm saying. And I also at the moment the next project is working with some little critters called naked mole rats, who are very polarising. I think they're lovely. Some people think they're really ugly. Sausages with teeth. And I'm looking at how we can use technology to create, how data can be used to create movement in objects. So it's about understanding kind of data visualization, but in the physical world through movement as opposed to screen-based stuff. So on top of that, my own work, I also run the Data as Culture program at the Open Data Institute. And through that, we look at how artists are using data as an art material, open data particularly, and facilitating artists to make that work. So we commission new works, we exhibit existing works, and we've got an ongoing program that's increasing in size and budget, which is really brilliant. And it's integral now to the Open Data Institute and how they work. So their remit is to catalyse the use of open data across every sector and any sector. And the cultural arm of that is all about helping people understand what open data is. And so my role is to do that through the arts.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to start asking a couple of questions to Cheryl. I wanted to ask you, obviously ABC's got a really great split of men and women, and particularly at board level. And I was wondering if there was anything that you can think of that makes ABC that, I mean, why is it that ABC's managed to achieve that? That's really, really unusual for a large organisation, I think, particularly the board level split. I was wondering if there was anything that you've identified that...
I was their first merit-based appointment. Before that they were largely political, so and then since me they have been merit-based as well. But I know that they do, because it's still related to government, there's generally a higher proportion of women with those sorts of boards than the big company ASX boards. And I know that when they do the matrix of skills required, so you might need someone finance, or you might need someone who implants fish and watches them swim, or the particular aspects. But I do know that they did pay attention to gender, and that they also paid attention to the regionality of the board, so that they didn't all end up from one tiny place sort of thing. So I didn't select anyone, but I think that is the case. It is just more open. And within the ABC itself, when I was talking to some people about the statistics that I presented, part of that is also there was an idea of, there are family-friendly and flexible work policies. And I think that's kept women either in or coming back, which has enabled them to get to some of these senior roles. So, because I think that's also interesting that you've got these very senior roles, like the head of news are female.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, you know, and she's an extraordinary woman.
Yeah. And have you ever experienced any form of sexism or any kind of being held back because of your gender in the workplace?
Yeah, I think we all have. I mean, you know, whether it's overtly or you know, or not. Yeah, there definitely have been times where I know that I've had the ability, I've had the experience, I've even been nominated by other people, and you know, normally, you know, you never take anything for granted, far from it, but you think you're in a pretty strong position. Or, you know, I mean, so many times. I've also had to deal as the chairman of a board with sexual harassment, not of me, but of sort of sexual harassment and bullying, and by the CEO, and that was really difficult of how it got reported, and then how we had to handle it. And I still look back and shudder and think, oh, it was just a really miserable time, but it was so good that people were brave enough to report it.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on that, you know, perhaps without going into too much detail, but, you know, what that situation was like?
It was a kind of a bullying situation, and someone else reported it, and we immediately took it incredibly seriously, as you have to. Consulted lawyers and so on, and really had to sort of take, you know, you also have to be careful if you fire someone that they can't turn around and sue you for wrongful dismissal. Yeah. And it's, I'm sure the laws are very similar here. It can happen very quickly. So it was a very staged process. Really difficult, including these conversations that I'd had to have with him, with other people in the room, so it wasn't just one-on-one. Yeah. No, it was actually really awful. But I think it managed well because no one ever heard about it. You know?
Well, and you have now, yeah.
Yeah, well, you don't know which comes from.
Yeah, exactly. And now, one of the we had a conversation before today. I spoke to all these guys on the phone briefly, and one of the things that you mentioned was actually that on the way up in various different jobs, it was sometimes the women ahead of you who were actually the least supportive people. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
No, that's actually one of the sadder things about the generation, probably more above me, who really did have to kick and fight and work really hard to get into their positions. And not all of them, but quite a few of them were pretty tough and certainly didn't lend a helping hand to the women who were coming up behind them, and often actually were quite difficult, actually made it harder. Yeah. And because of that experience, I've actually made it a point of, I actually mentor quite a big stable of women. I've got a couple of guys as well, and to the point that I have to be careful because I don't want to suddenly be inundated. Yeah. But and the other thing is, if you're a buddy of mine, say let's have coffee, it might be 3, 4, 5 weeks out. But when my younger mentees ring, I say, all right, come to my house tomorrow. You know, like I sort of lay down tools. So, and I think that is much more the case these days. But it's disappointing when another woman does that. It is really, you know, we've got enough to deal with.
Yeah. I think you're going to have to head off now, so thank you very much.
So I'm really very sorry I have to be somewhere. I really would, I'm fascinated to hear more.
Yeah, we'll talk on your behalf then. And I'm wondering, thank you very much. Has Mariéme arrived? No. Okay. Oh, yes, we have our final panelist. I'm going to make her come straight on stage. I'll give Mary.
Entire London tube.
Oh, welcome. Do you want to take a seat?
Yes, thank you.
I'll give you a little moment to breathe, and I'm going to tackle these guys for a second. And I want to ask you guys first, and the same question that I actually asked Cheryl, which was whether you have ever experienced any kind of sexism or any anything kind of negative because of your gender within the workplace.
No.
I
really haven't. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've worked for myself, and I've always been very nice to myself. But also, my clients have been public sector, and the public sector is always very good. In my experience, has always been very good, sort of over and above. Outside of that, so I haven't. But when you asked me this question when we were talking about it on the phone, I was thinking about it afterwards, and I was thinking, I've just been really lucky. I've never experienced it. But where I have experienced a difference because of my gender was when I was at school, and the expectation of what I was going to do when I left school was work for a bit and then get married, and then maybe have babies and then maybe go back to work. And the kinds of jobs that I was offered, and I'm 42, so this is quite a while ago, but the kinds of jobs that I was offered were kind of nursing and all that kind of stuff. but my daughter, who's 16, is being offered the same kind of jobs, and there is still the same kind of expectation. And I know for a fact that she has not been talked to about any kind of jobs in digital, which is ridiculous because there are so many. And so I think for me, and so from my own personal experience, but also from what I'm seeing around me, is that it might not be in the workplace, but it's still in schools. So I think we need to kind of look there.
Julie?
I think it is still in the workplace, unfortunately. I think it's just, happens differently. It can be quite subtle. But that just the story there just reminded me of a situation I had. I had a media company that I ran, and there was 7 directors, and don't do that again, don't ever do that. And it's a very small company, but we had the same issue where we were getting through sort of members of staff that were helping with admin and stuff very quickly. And then it was on the 3rd one that reported that she was being sexually harassed by our CEO, who was a relative of mine. And that was a super awkward situation, and we had to deal with it, and eventually we managed to other things conspired so that the company got split, and then he didn't work with us anymore. So, but that was super awkward, because that's a potentially family splitting thing as well as a workplace, and it's also just a really awful thing to hear. Really awful thing to hear from someone that you're related to. You're like, wow. And it really opened my eyes at the time, and I was maybe 23, 24 at the time, and I thought, wow, that was all happening in a very small company, in a very relatively small office, and I didn't even see it. I didn't even notice it. And that was kind of an interesting reflection to have, that this thing goes on a lot, and because it is subtle and hard to detect, and I think maybe that and I can see, because he was a family member, I can see why that he was doing that, because I knew his family history. So it kind of, I'm not condoning it in any way, but that was a really interesting and complicated situation. But yeah, we spoke on the phone. I said, I don't really want to talk about it in public, but it has happened to me where I've been, assumed to be the secretary, and I'm like, I'm the technical lead on your project. They're like, can you get some coffee? All that kind of stuff. And I concur that it tend to be a different generation. At the ODI, we're a much younger company, only just over a year old, and it's non-existent. There's not even, I can't imagine anyone even contemplating, having any of those kind of gender biases there at all.
Mariéme, welcome. I was hoping you could just give a little brief introduction about what you do to the audience, and then I'd like to ask you the same question about whether you'd experienced any kind of sexism in the workplace.
Right. So I'm a young CEO. I've got an enterprise software company, and so my clients are the African government and investors in private sector. So we just sell from supply chain management software to retail software to any government in Africa and in Asia as well. So that's what I do that's what pays my bills. but on my activist hat, I have got a platform called Africa Gathering here, and it allows people to share ideas about Africa, mainly to tell people really what's going on, because if you're sitting in London or in Singapore, you don't really know what's going on in the continent, and all you see is the negative narratives about Africa. So for the last 6 years, 7 years, I've been really putting my activist hat on to really share ideas about Africa and tell people what's going on there. I think that's part of my diaspora role as well, to give them evidence and facts. So everything we do is fact and evidence-based. So from women empowerment to good governance and transparency in Africa. So I work with many African governments to just kind of like reset their settings and their systems. Kind of like really trying to improve the continent, really. That's what I do on my spare time.
No biggie, just improving a continent. And what about the question of whether you've experienced any discrimination for your gender within the workplace?
Yeah, it's, like I was saying this morning, it's like, when you're in Europe and also when you are in Africa, I find it both ways. In Europe, they don't usually associate, a young black woman CEO working in Canary Wharf. So they don't associate myself to those sort of, stereotypes. which is a bit funny because my boss, my ex-boss at HSBC, her office is just next to my office. So, are you working here? Yes, we just rent an office here. So you know, and people don't understand because the African women usually the you know people associate us with development, and I think that's the fault of the media around the world. And also, I think one of also our fault as African women because we're very scared and very shy in telling people that we running $1 million companies. So because people don't associate us with that, and I find that very very painful in Europe because I have to prove myself 200%. I've got a very good friend of mine. We used to study in Paris together. She got a gaming company in here in the UK. Is doing very well, and I remember going to events with her. And every time we go somewhere, people think I'm her PA. And she'll say to people, she's my mentor actually, she's kind of like helping me. So it's very, the stereotype is still there in Europe. But when you come to Africa, when I'm trying to sell the enterprise software to African government, they don't take me seriously. They don't see that, I can sell them solution and save them money. Especially we are in a main dominated environment in Africa. I was in Burkina Faso selling, redoing an entire website from SharePoint to the ECOWAS, which is the UMOA, and the IT director didn't take me seriously, and I took from some of my friends from Scotland, and the guy said to me, we just bought him some chocolate and some biscuits. He said, "You're here to bribe us." So they don't take it seriously. They can't imagine, a young woman like myself could help them improve their systems and their solutions. So. Because it has to be a man, a strong man, and if I'm with a white man, they don't even talk to me. Basically, they talk to him, which is really sad. But I find that quite upsetting in Africa.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, obviously, that's the kind of bad side of being a woman in technology. But, I mean, as a journalist who writes about technology and being a woman, I get asked to do a lot of these things, perhaps way more than I would otherwise get if I was a guy writing about technology. And so I think there are benefits to there is a kind of flip side to it in that because there are so few and people are trying to, in many ways, create a better balance, that you do get some benefits. And I wanted to ask if you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, it does. You can't. The thing is, because probably 52% of my business is in Africa, it's very different to create this balance. Because you're asking yourself, do they really need what? Do they really understand what you're trying to do or not? And it's quite painful sometimes. But I think that as the continent progress in Africa, and one of my role also to tell people in Europe here, my counterpart, my women friends in Europe who are in the tech industry, women CIOs, and tell them, come to the continent and see your counterpart. We have women in Rwanda or in Mozambique. They are looking after, $2 billion, IT systems. And if you say that to somebody in Europe, they're going to say, "Are you serious?" So, you meet, African CIOs. We don't have many African CIOs right now, but we have many African women in technology. So one of my job is to really talk about science in Africa and innovation and technology and make people understand, Africa is just not development. I was joking the other day with my son saying that the make poverty history will expire in 2015. By the time they realize that Africa is not poor anymore, then I'll be there writing that. So that's one of the things I find quite upsetting. But it's part of our job to change the narratives. We need to think about it in a point of view where people don't know what's happening. BBC have been bombarding us with African narratives from the poor child to Ethiopia until now for 80 years, quite a long time. So to find that impartiality and that balance, to make people understand that Africa is actually, we have amazing scientists and women tech, it's hard to believe in this country.
Okay. I want to ask you guys about positive discrimination. Like, have there been occasions when you feel that you've had opportunities that you wouldn't have got if you'd been a man in the same industry? Emma, let's start with you.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I have. In the industry that I'm in, and being an entrepreneur and everything else, it's kind of, it definitely helps being a woman where there's a lot more men than there are women.
Yeah.
And women in technology, they always want to roll me out at every single conference so that I can go and talk. So yeah.
And here you are.
Here I am. No. And you know, those are so much so that actually, if it was my career, it'd be great. but yeah, no, I mean, I definitely do. But there's also, I think, you know, what comes with that is the responsibility to make sure that if there is somebody else that can speak on the subject that you've been asked to speak on, that is someone that you know or is in your organisation, that is a woman, that they get up to speak about it as well. Because otherwise, my profile will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody else will get a chance. So I boot a lot of, not just because I'm being lazy, but because I want to get other women that can talk on the subject better than I can up in front of a mic.
Yeah, I think, yeah, similar things you get asked to talk about at conferences because they're looking for a female. But I get the same kind of discrimination because I'm an artist. So they're like, oh yeah, let's get the artist in. And then, you know, maybe they'll contribute something quacky to the conversation. You know, this kind of weird. So the stereotyping works, you know, sometimes I have both of that, the artist and the woman in tech. Wow, you know, let's get her in. But I think we did it ourselves. So I'm on the board of an organisation called MISTech, and we train, we help to run workshops for women in technology who want to learn how to code or to hack hardware and stuff like that. But they want to do it in an environment where they're feeling that they're going to be taught by women. They're not always women only, but sometimes they are, depending on what we're doing. And they're really successful, really nice social events. And when we ran the commission for the first Call for Artists with the Data as Culture programme, we tried to encourage female artists to apply, because in the data art world, it's very men orientated at the moment. Because there's a lot of developers, so they tend to come from that side. So there was some active, positive discrimination at the beginning of the process, and by the end of the process, we just kind of forgot about that and we're just like, we want these artworks. And as it goes, we ended up having just under 50% females involved anyway. So it turned into a sort of, you know, the artistic concepts won out, and they happened to be, there's some really strong works by women. So, but yeah, I think sometimes it's necessary, sometimes maybe it's a good trigger initially, and then it can lead to something else. Right.
Do you think it could be that there are just some professions that men and women have better skills that are suited for certain types of professions? I mean, for example, if we look at nursing and care, there tend to be a lot of women, and as we said, we're here to talk about technology, there are a lot more men. Is there something about the way we are wired that explains that difference, or is it just a matter of sort of this a situation where we've had kind of discrimination historically? It's a big question, but
very big question.
Start with you, Anna.
I'll try and wrap my brain around a little bit of that. So I think my instinct says no in technology. My instinct says that that there is absolutely no reason. So nursing, you know, maybe, you know, there's reason. I can see absolutely no reason why it would be, you know, a particularly male domain. But then again, if you go back, so I think partly history, but also education. So, you know, are the boys being pushed down the route of maths and science and business, and the girls are being sent down the English and art route? And I can't believe it's still happening now, but, you know, I think it is. So I think it is an issue. I do think it goes back into education, and I really can't see why being a boy makes you a better geek.
Yeah, and you were saying actually that sometimes it's the parents themselves who don't want their girls to go into technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, of the bigger problems that technology have, I think brand is the biggest, and parents don't want their children. Well, firstly, they don't want their children going into a job where they might be picked on and they might be the nerd. And secondly, they don't want their children on the internet because they're just told all the time that the internet's full of paedophiles. So they keep their kids, you know, away from the internet and, you know, offline, and go and watch television because it's better. But whereas the boys, they feel safer. So, you know, the messaging, the kind of branding of the whole kind of geek space, I think that's what would help it.
Well, it's a problem because technology isn't just computer software. It's not just coding. You know, technology is so many different things. I mean, I was thinking about women that inspire me, and I thought of Bryony Worthington, Baroness Worthington, and she helped to draft the climate change bill. She's very technical. She talks very intelligently about the use of thorium in nuclear power. You know, she's got a lot of scientific background, and she's a woman in tech. but she's not deemed to be a woman in tech because she's not sort of online, which is, you know, and I think that branding thing is exactly right, and it's the perspective of, the parents and the teachers and their mentors, aunts and uncles, anyone around the children that are steering them into directions they feel safe with, not that might be best for the young people. So,
Yeah, I've got one quick point that I want to just jump in with, but I know it's your turn to speak. But I know I've totally forgot what I was going to say. It'll come back.
Okay.
There you go.
I was going to ask you the same question. Do you feel that there might be some jobs that are just simply better suited to different genders?
It depends where we are. I mean, I'm in both continents, so I can see the European point of view and the African point of view. But I think here in the UK, the women I meet, for example, they do want to get into tech. They do want to get into technology and really stand out. But we're quite shy here. I think we wait for permission in this country to get into certain certain kind of like industries. But maybe because we have too much choice. But if you go to Asia, for example, I've got amazing friends from India and from Africa. They really kind of like getting into tech, because they want to compete with men, and they're not scared to get into technology. And I'm not just talking about technology just because you want to label yourself, but they actually understand. They code from Java to Ruby. They really understand the technology as such. And we have ICT programs being funded by the UK government here, going to Africa. But those girls, and the women I meet there, they really know how to code with a very limited, resources. And they're not looking to become nurses or lawyers. And this mindset has changed in Africa now and in Asia, and especially in India. It has changed completely because women understand technology. If you go to India today, women understand this, and they're improving amazingly, highly qualified and skilled women into these industries. And now we have, and the next generation of African women will be into that sector as well. There'll be technology because now everybody got access to laptops. We still have the fiber optic coming to Africa. We still have broadband issues, internet issues. But give Africa the next 5 years, you'll have the amazing women really heading all these organizations. So I think we are a bit behind in the UK here, and we have amazing women in technology here. But I think we wait for permission, we're a bit shy, and we don't, come forward. And I think we need to change a little bit our mindset here.
Okay. Sorry.
I was just going to say that historically, there's a lot of women that were computer programmers, particularly. So in the Manhattan Project, at Bletchley Park, loads of females there, and that was kind of one of the default roles was that women would be doing that. So it's just about coming full circle.
And then there was war.
And then
that happened during the war, and then all the boys came home.
And then they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll do that."
Yeah.
Thanks.
The thing I remembered the thing that I
good.
forgot. So what I was going to say was that, and it's kind of almost back to what you were saying as well, is that the kids that I think are the true digital natives are the ones that were born in '97. And those kids grew up with social media. They grew up in such an open and communicating world that there really is no difference between girls and boys. They communicate with each other. They have groups of girl and boy friends like such that you have just never seen before because the opportunity is just there. They know this. So they're born in '97. They're now 16, 17 years old. They're about 4 or 5 years off coming into the marketplace. And I think once those kids get into the marketplace and they start moving into all of, all areas, as well as technology, and obviously they'll be moving into technology because there's going to be loads of jobs in there, then I think that the balance will even up because these kids will do it because they just will not see that gender is relevant at all.
I think we also need to invest. When I meet 16 years old girls in Africa, and I meet 16 years old girls here in Oxford, and I see the difference where the girls in Africa, for example in Senegal, Binta and her team, they are between 21 and to 27. They're so passionate and so eager and so kind of like really determined to do that. But when I come to Europe, I even talk about e-commerce site, if they can do that, or some of them they're not interested. I think we within the educational system we need to tell girls, you can do this, and technology is actually sexy. You can work hard into science and technology innovation, and you can do that. Because we have really amazing young women, British women CEOs. They run companies. I mean, their companies are not listed yet or making $billion dollars turnovers, but they're amazing women, and you meet them in the US. So we need to. I think the government and the curriculum, we need to push the women here, the young girls, that they can do that, because otherwise they're going to be having massive difficulties competing with their counterpart around the world.
So I want to ask one more question to the panel, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So if you've got any questions, start thinking about them now. But it kind of ties into that. It's the idea of role models. When I think of big tech role models, I think of Bill Gates, I think of Steve Jobs, but I struggle a little bit more to think of those big female tech role models. I mean, we have got Sheryl Sandberg, but I wanted to ask you guys very quickly who your role models are and what you think we can do to encourage or make sure we have more female role models in this space. I'm going to start with Julie, if possible.
So I mentioned Bryony Worthington, but I was thinking, I mean, I work with the technical director of the ODI, Jenny Tennyson, and she has worked directly with Tim Berners-Lee a lot, and she's just she's an amazing woman. She's a mother of two, but she really has got an incredible leadership style, and she leads all of the technology development of that in that space. And she's one of my personal heroes, I have to say. People like Martha Lane Fox, another very strong character who is happy to talk and shout about what she's done, and has really made use of her position and elevated herself into a way where she has a big voice now, which is really great. And then other people that on a sort of lesser known scale, I guess, in the kind of media arts world, Hannah Redler has been working at the Science Museum, and she's pushed the Science Museum to have media arts program there, and now they acquire pieces of artwork that they didn't before. She's worked tirelessly to do that for over a decade. I don't know, in the biotech world, Suzanne Lee, who's developing clothes that grow your own clothing, is a sort of snapshot line, but she's very into the sort of biotech world, and she's out there and she does a lot of talking and is very a real advocate for women working in that sector. So there's kind of like a mix of people that are well known and not known.
Emma, who are your role models, would you say?
That's a very broad question.
Okay.
I mean, I would say in the tech space, there's one person that I will always put her on a platform every time I get the opportunity, and her name's Avid Larizada, and she runs an online shop called Botica, which brings together all people that kind of produce their own jewellery, which is lovely. It's very successful, and she's young. Female, but she's a computer scientist, and she studied it at Harvard, and she studied it at Stanford, but she's also an entrepreneur, and she has chosen to kind of go, to kind of start this business, but she obviously has a whole team of people who do the website. She doesn't make the website herself, she doesn't do any of that, she's the entrepreneur, she's running the business, but she has this computer science background, and that combined with her other skills that she has. She's just a really interesting girl, but she's so busy. She's also running this hour of code that's going on this week, because she thought she saw it happening in the US, and she thought it should happen in the UK, so she just did it. So, I mean, I think the kind of the girls that inspire me are the ones that are the entrepreneurs, and then they just happen to also have these technical skills. But on the point, we have discussed this, and we're going to come to questions in a minute, but I don't think there are enough role models in technology, certainly not any that you can kind of trip off the tongue, other than Martha, and she's completely relevant to the next generation of kids who don't know who she is. But also, I don't think you can make them. No. I don't think you can fabricate them.
No, yeah.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, quickly, if we ask you who your role models are, and then we might open up.
That's a very. I don't see. I don't see myself having role models into the tech sector, because I see women who are broadcasting technology and actually telling people technology is good, and encouraging women to use technology, because we can have access to technology anywhere in Europe. If you go to Africa, some women, they sit down all day without internet connection, without electricity, but they have technology anyway. So they develop stuff, e-commerce site from A to Z, And that's one type of people I'm talking about. And the other type of people I'm talking about are the type of Maggie Perrin Pocox. She has dyslexia, and she's one of the first black women in the UK to become woman, space scientist. So those women, people like Maggie didn't have access to technology when she was growing up. She was labeled as an African woman anyway, and having some dysfunctional stuff. So people didn't see her as somebody who could achieve stuff for the MOD, for example, in the United Kingdom. So I think I see the role model are the broadcasters, people who are like Marta, who are really nagging the government to invest into ICT and technology, and the other people who really care and understand this subject. I think we need to have women who really, not the technical side, but understand the subject and what science, technology, engineering and mathematics can do to women gender equality. This is very important. And right now, in Africa and Asia, that's my focus. And you're going to see the difference between, if we don't invest into girls here in the UK, like I said earlier, there'll be a massive gap between them and their counterpart in Asia and in Africa, and we will be ahead.
So do we have any questions from the audience? Oh wow, we've got loads. I saw you first, I'm going to go with you first.
Hi, I kind of disagree with the fact that people born in 97 are the generation that are going to be, ready and in the workforce to be working in digital at 21. I've got my goddaughter, she's 15, and we were talking about digital the other day, and all you're taught in IT at school is IT, Word and Excel. I don't think this is a problem for just girls, it's a problem for boys, but what can we be doing as a campaign to really make coding, make gaming much more exciting, both for boys and for girls?
That's a very important question. We have this issue in Africa where people think ICT is technology, and the government, especially as a UK taxpayers here, so just to tell you a secret, we are paying so much money on ICT programs across the world. And the government of Africa will not get from that budget of the ICT we gave, the UK government have given to them to invest into science. So I was sitting down with the Minister of ICT in Lagos, and I was looking into her budget. So this is the combination between the World Bank budget, United Nations budget, and DFID budget, by the way. That's what she have to work on. So you look into the report and into her budgeting, there is no science in it. There is no engineering in it. There is no mathematics in it. There is no technology in it. So she had got ICT program that she needs to deliver to DFID. This is a massive issue. And if we're doing the same thing in the UK, you can see the problem is not just a UK problem, it's a global problem. So we need to differentiate what is ICT and what is really technology and STEM subjects.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the campaigning and lobbying government to get them to teach coding in schools has been something I've been doing for 6 years. They are now just starting to bring it in. It's not going to, but I'm not talking about programming. I am talking about understanding a digital space. All of the jobs that are going to be in there that are technology jobs. I mean, there's technology in every single subject you can think of. So what I'm saying is that is when the levelling up will come, is when these kids who are used to social media and are used to talking to each other all the time, when they go into these roles, a difference between the gender will be irrelevant to them. That's what I mean.